Okay, perfect. Hi everyone, happy 2022. Feels great to be back on the streaming side of things, and hope you had a restful and good Christmas, New Year break, however you celebrated it. And I will be starting 2022 with the new Vigs, the lovely new titled Vigs. So I have them assembled and primed. Thought I would also just give you a quick rundown of things I painted in the meanwhile. So last couple of weeks have been fire themed for me. So the new carries. I wasn't really that happy about the skull, but when I started painting it, it really grew on me. I think she's a super cool model. Then the Kandara, quite big and lots of nice mixtures of colors here that I enjoyed working on, and the Deacon, the new enforcer. So, quite a few things. Now, as for today, I will be painting these ladies, and I plan to go more or less using the artwork color schemes that I have. So, browns, dark metallics, dark browns, light browns, pale skin tone, pale hair, and why don't I get started? So, as for the assembly of the model, it's pretty straightforward. Not many places to go wrong. Oh, I love the emoji in the chat. Looks like straight up out of Malifaux. Although I did initially make a mistake of wrongly gluing there one of the legs, so I needed to fix that. But that's not that complicated. I thought about painting them separately, but then I want to work on them simultaneously. So, well, without further ado, I will just dig in and start because when I see that after assembling there are some elements which still don't look perfect, I just apply a layer of glue over them, of plastic glue, let it dry. And hey, Doc, thanks for dropping by. Good to see you. Hope the end of the previous year and the start of the new one are good for you. So let me start with Wraithbone. And I will just repeat some of the areas where I think that it got too dark. I will try to keep it closer to the middle using my trusted paint handle, which is the old painting pot. Much shorter than the GW one, which makes it easier to keep it closer to the camera. And now I will just repeat the areas where I used glue to just go over some gaps that were too prominent. I think that the biggest challenge here, or my biggest hesitation, is how to do this special effect going on from the blade. And it is not visible in the artwork really. I didn't really expect it to be there. I only realized it's there when I saw the 3D render. So now I need to do something about it. Well, tired otherwise day has been solid, but if you're tired but doing good, then it's good. Now I will keep on making sure that there are no spots where the glue is visible. I'm fine with some areas being darker because they will be darker. I think I will be able to do most of the miniature tonight, maybe all of it. I My idea is to paint this as a kind of fire effect, because after all, Malifaux burns, right? And since Malifaux burns, fire is the thing. So I may as well use fire here. I've recently received an order for a lot of intensity inks from Green Stuff World, and they are really so good for painting flames, like this one here. Candy inks and intensity inks, they just make a world of difference. So I think I may just do this whole effect as some kind of flame, maybe somewhat similarly to what I did on Carrie's. I'm thinking something like that I did on the wings, where it looks really fiery. So during the Christmas break, I actually ended up spending most of the time at home since my kids decided to use this opportunity and be ill, which is something that small kids tend to do, especially in the holiday period. So I got hold of digital copy of Malifaux Burns and did some reading. I thought I would just get up to speed with what's happening in the world of Malifaux, and there is some good stuff happening. Well, what I liked about the book is I read the core story. I didn't read the, well, I haven't read the individual stories yet of the new characters or of the titled masters, only some of them. And the lore in the new book is mainly focused on those characters that were affected the most by the Burning Man. So obviously, those are Carries one of the examples. I think Ulix, Euripides. Who else is there? Now I'm switching to Basilic and Grey for the beginning of the work on the base. And there is also Riva. There is Tony. No, Tony is not affected by the Burning Man, but she's featured in the story. And there is also Maxine from Explorers. And who else is there? Maxine, Tony, Euripides, Ulix, Misaki, and is there anyone else? So the lore is, well, the stories are centered around those characters, and they play the main part, which is cool. But then some other characters make appearance as well. There is a bit more about Ivan, who was barely mentioned in the Explorer's book, so we get to see how he operates with his Mr. Mordrake with Shadow, because he's this master spy character, and there is some nice interaction between him and his Shadow and how they seamlessly operate when they are on covert mission. And I thought that was kind of cool because Ivan is one of the more popular characters in game. Oh, how annoying were the weeks? I wouldn't say that they were very annoying. I started with assembling just the miniatures without this special effect. And then I only had one issue. I didn't use the instructions. They are probably already out. I wasn't really looking for them when I assembled them. So the only struggle I had was I think I mistakenly assembled their some of the legs wrongly and they wouldn't fit onto this spell effect. But once I got that figured out, it was pretty fine. I would say that I have assembled much more challenging models for Malifaux, so not too bad. On a scale of 0 to 10, where 0 is super relaxing and as easy as Sidir who comes in 3 pieces, to super annoying as Yanlo's beard or Abuela's pipe, I would say that these would be a 5 or 6. So pretty straightforward. And Outcast Crew, yeah, it definitely has a lot of wonderful miniatures. Just Emissary. It's one of the most amazing miniatures in the game. So now that I have the core color on the base, I think I will start with the clothes, or maybe with the skin. I will start with the skin then. Why not? Now here I'm hesitating because one of them is a human, the other one is essentially a neverborn doppelganger. So I was thinking that maybe I would do one with skin tone that is more human-like and the other one with a hint of more purple or red, just to make one more look slightly more otherworldly, and one would have normal set of eyes, and the other fiery eyes, or maybe I will do flaming eyes on both, and those would be like ladies dancing with fire or in fire. This is something that I'm considering now. So let's give it a good shake. And the Golem Flesh, my go-to color for human skin. Perfect contrast color, one of my favorites. Can be used straight from the pot and immediately makes impact on the model. The kind of impact I want to have, where the shades are seamlessly formed. And this is some kind of ornament that they have. I'm just consulting the artwork for reference to see where the skin is, where the material is. Well, clearly these ladies aren't heavily armored because that's not what you put them for. You do not put them on the table for sustaining damage. You put them for sheer damage output. Those are like nuclear missiles. They come in, they kill things, and if they survive, they kill more things. Or if they don't survive, then they just make sure that they kill enough things to make their death worthwhile. And their fluff in the story for them, and some spoilers here, because they used to have this powerful sword which had a tyrant in it. They lost that sword to Titania, and that's why new Titania has a sword on her base, which is a bit disappointing because I was hoping that the new Titania would be this killer version of a master wielding a sword with a tyrant in it. She's still cool enough. So they lost this powerful artifact, the sword that they had, and they were extremely unhappy. The Victoria, not the doppelganger, the Victoria chamber, so the human one, was very unhappy. But she decided that, well, no point sitting and crying over spilled milk and lost sword. So let's take matters into our own hands and let's get the sword back. So she regrouped, and she's now hellbent on getting the sword back. So while they lost the magical sword, the bond with her doppelganger half became even stronger, and they are just ready to jump back into action. So going a little beyond the skin area, which is fine because I will come with a brush and bring back the base color and work over it again. Oh, the new Titania, she's so cool. So such a cool model, and she's on a 40mm base, so she will be quite a big one. I assume quite a big one. And she's getting released in the first quarter, so if she gets released in the first quarter, if there are no unexpected delays, and if I happen to have her on my workspace, then I will be more than happy to paint her over a stream or two for you guys, because she will be an amazing model for sure. So now pausing for a second to let the paint dry a little bit. Let's just make sure I get the good focus here. Seems like the focus is off. Let me try to stabilize it. Oh well, I'm not that good on the fluff tag. There might be some twist in it. I don't remember exactly. I just know that they lost the sword somehow to Titania, and now she has it. I don't know how it happened. Whether it was in the heat of the battle or whether it took some careful planning. But the fact is that they no longer have the sword with the tyrant. Oh, come on, let's see. What can I do to get the proper quality? Seems like the camera is focused on things that are further instead of being locked in on what's up ahead. Now that's an improvement. This looks good. Perfect. Now I can continue working on the skin, and in order to make a smooth transition from the base color to this rosy pinky skin tone, which is Midland Flesh from P3 range, I will mix in a little bit of Golem Flesh with this color, just as I used to use it for my first highlight. So I will take some out of the pot. And mix it in. And start highlighting the skin. And then I think when I come to the point where I work on, where I give a final glaze to the skin, I will just use different glazes to differentiate them slightly. So which one do you think should be the doppelganger here and which one the human? To something about the double Vicky and Taylor were concerned about the influence schedule. Could be something about the influence. I'll just thin it down slightly. And not using my smallest brush now, the fine detail brush, just want to give a solid, slightly brownish base coat on top of what I have after applying the contrast color. See, I meant to read on the fluff of Vix because Word website has this very nice section where there is a summary of each master's story, and I meant to do it while I was traveling on a train from work, but I ended up working on my way home in order not to work in the evening. So I didn't do it, but if anyone is an expert on the fluff of Vix, then please feel free to fill in on what I missed out on. So I'm thinking that maybe the one that's jumping would be the doppelganger. So she will have a slightly different skin tone. maybe a touch of purple or a touch of blue just to make her look a little bit less natural, not like a human. That's what I mean. But if you've watched any of my streams before, you know that I come to painting with a general rough idea of what I want to do, and then I make up my mind as I work on the model. So now I'll switch to a slightly finer brush. And use pure Midland Flesh with a few drops of water, with a drop of water. When I mix in water, I do it to get a slightly different consistency, to thin paint down, because for what I'm doing, it allows me to have slightly better control, where I can apply a thin layer, and if I notice that it's not how I want it to look, I can make some small improvements on the fly, because the effect is not that immediate. It just takes a few layers of highlights to get where I want to get. So I can make some corrections if I need to. But then I'm not a fan of saying that there is one right consistency of paint that one should be using. It's just whatever works for you at the current time. So while reading the fluff for Malifaux Burns, and I won't be spoiling it here because it's still a fairly new release. I mean, the physical copy hasn't reached many stores yet. The digital one is out there, but some people prefer to wait for the physical copy. It's quite good. Quite good. I rather enjoyed reading it. I think that I would say that some characters seem to have more exciting turn of events connected with them than others. For example, I found the story of Riva and Misaki intriguing, but not that well. Those weren't that action packed. They were more of them coming to some kind of realization how to solve a problem that they had. Whereas the Ulix one was just kind of hilarious, packed with. So it was written in a typical fashion that you would like to have the bio stories flow, where things happen seemingly in a chaotic manner, unexpectedly, and that was for sure fun to read. Now I think the lighting got a bit better, so should be easier to follow now. Also, Lucius is featured quite prominently there. I think that he and Nexus are quite interesting. I really liked how the change in Nexus from this one creature to three different ones is explained. I mean, it's not fully explained. We do not get the full picture, but we get an idea that it was a nasty process to lead to that. But the explanation why the process happened is quite interesting and well worth the read for that reason alone. Okay, now time to get it slightly brighter. So I will keep on highlighting using a brighter shade. So just for comparison, this is what we started with, or maybe, I'm not sure if it's visible. This is what we started it with. This is the highlight. And now it will be time for a second highlight. I've recently started using new range of paints from AK range, AK-47 paints. I believe they are from Spain and I love them. Probably those are my go-to paints from now on. What makes them good is that they are in dropper bottles, which are, well, by default, much better. And it seems that the consistency is just perfect. They have something I'm not sure that they have no, they do not have anything inside to help with the mix, but it just seems that whenever I just apply them, they have the right consistency. And this is the second highlight. Oopsie, not sure how visible is that. Let's move aside the miniature. All right, so there you see the first color, the highlight, the second highlight. So quite the difference. And while making the second highlight, I want to make the transition much more prominent so that it's immediately visible. And even if it becomes less smooth than I would like it to be, I'm fine with it at this stage because I will be applying glazes over that and glaze will smooth things over. So what I want to make sure is that I pick out the cheekbones, the nose, and that those and the forehead and the muscles, just to make sure that those elements are clearly brighter. And if the transition isn't super smooth, I'm fine with that because a few washes will follow. Washes, I would say not washes, glazes. So I will be tinting it with glazes rather than flooding them with washes. Yeah, I think that if I decided to paint them separately, I would just make things too complicated. So the only downside of not painting them separately is that it might be challenging for you guys to follow up on what I'm doing here because sometimes the areas that I need to get into are quite challenging to get to with a brush. So I need to hold the miniature at an unusual angle. But overall, the main theme of the new book is fire, chaos, and the impact that the Burning Man has on some characters. And it's really well written. It starts with Euripides, and he is in pain until Titania suggests a solution to relieve his pain, and she brings forth the idea of this rune magic, which goes with the fluff of the, which goes with the rules also that the new character has. So that's neatly done there. So now that the skin got much brighter, I will kick it up a notch and apply one more highlight. Maybe grab a smaller brush for that. A really fine brush for detail painting, and I will get a much brighter color. So just to give you guys an idea of how bright it is compared to the previous. So you see the gradation from skin tone to pinkish one, well, to the brighter one, and that's the brightest highlight that I will be applying, which is essentially white with a hint of skin tone. And I'm being more careful here, just barely touching with the tip of the brush the areas which I want to be brighter. And you need to be careful here because you can easily get an effect which would be comical, which would look like as if she had mustache. So if that becomes too prominent, I will just straight away bring it back and make sure that the paint is super thin, thinned down to milk-like consistency, and just going over the elbow, middle section of the forearm, picking up the back details. That's more or less it. Oh, and I spilled some water, which is not great. Let me just grab some tissues. As long as the water isn't spilled on the laptop, that's fine. That's why I have this big area and I can move things around. Yeah, that's a sign of good luck, I would say. Spilling. It's like, shattering glass at a wedding ceremony. It means good luck. If you spill water while doing a painting session on the stream, it means that it will go very well in the end. There, disaster averted. I just need a bit of cleanup, and things are under control. Good. So now I will be tinting the skin tone because they look extremely pale, which is fine, but not perfect. I want to bring some coherence to the color of the skin. So I will use a mixture of two washes, so Carroburg Crimson and Untitled Flesh shade. And those two will be mixed with some Lamian Medium. And Lamian Medium, the difference between thinning down paints with water and thinning down with Lamian Medium is that when you thin down paints with water, you need to be very careful because it's easy for the pigment to separate, and the covering properties are impacted. Now, while using Lamian Medium, you maintain the covering properties of the paint, so it flows onto all the surfaces evenly. It's like essentially creating a slightly different paint. So for reference, here's the glaze that I will be applying. It's a mixture of light brown and purple, which I find works quite well for human skin. And since this is a glaze, it won't change the overall appearance dramatically, but it will still flow into the recesses. And just to put it in context, it's as if I was using filter on the miniature. So think of those filters, for example, or on Instagram, where with one click you get a slightly different look. This is essentially what I'm doing here, just fine-tuning the appearance. And the color that was quite pale now becomes much different. So for reference, here is the one that received a glaze, and here is the one that didn't. So time to work on the second one. And for glazes to work, you can apply as many of them as you want. You can make them more focused on one specific area. So for example, put a little more in the armpit area, which is darker by default as she's raising her blade. So now that the first filter is drying, the areas which are flat and do not have recesses dry fastest. So I will selectively apply a little bit more closer to the hairline to create a shade there, a little bit more around the eye sockets, maybe slight adjustment to the area below the lower lip. And again, closer to the hairline. And as it dries, I can already start on the clothes. So what I'm thinking for the clothes would be light brown and dark brown, which is not really surprising. So, and some really dark colors on the pants. So I will go ahead and start with Black Templar. And already mark the areas that are darker. Or maybe I will do the hair first. Why don't I do the hair first? I will just repick the hair with bright shade. It's almost pure white. It's essentially a slightly off-white color. So I want to make sure that the hairline is brought back in line. And now that I have it, I will use Skeleton Horde, which might not be the most obvious choice for painting her, but it gives this nice muted look that will be easy to work with in the next stage. So I'm just going over the hair with pure Skeleton Horde because I want to have the hair similar to the artwork. just further accentuate the transition here where the hairline starts. Then it's just a matter of a highlight or two to have those really pale bright hair that they have on the artwork. Make sure I don't miss any spots. And I will be further pushing the shades with the glaze I prepared a few minutes ago. It's still fresh on the palette, and I don't really need to use wet palette since I don't wait that long before reapplying it. So doing a little bit in the midsection of the stomach. I'll just grab a smaller brush and hit some of the recesses again to just further push the shades there. And they look like they have some really dark makeup around the eyes, so I will work with that. Just reapplying the glaze to some of the areas which I want to keep slightly darker. Looks better now. And I may use this color, which is this, it's called Luminous Flash. And from my newfound love, AK-47 range of paints, really great paints. Cannot recommend them enough. Maybe a fine brush would be a better idea here. And gently touching up the cheekbones, a little bit on the forehead, the nose, and just picking up the fine details, making a few dots here and there to go along with what I would imagine to be the areas which are most impacted by light, or the muscles that would be bulging when they flex them in this dynamic choreographed position that they have. And when the paint has thin consistency, it's just a tad easier for me to keep the highlights structured. And I will work on their faces now. So, Emperor's Children for the lips. And while working, before maybe I tackle the lips, I will make sure, no, there is enough of a shade to make it clearly visible that their mouth is closed. And I will just go directly with, or maybe I will very slightly tint it to make it a bit darker for the first layer of the highlight on this really tiny area. So the lower lip only. And now pure pink. Twirling the tip of the brush to make sure it's a solid tip when I tackle this tiny area. I'm just gently easing it over the surface. Just a gentle, smooth movement. That way I can ensure that I just pick up the lower lip without affecting the area around it. So I will just highlight it slightly. Time flies by while you're having fun. It's almost an hour into this painting stream and I already have most of the skin done. Just maybe a few tweaks here and there. But I will also allow myself room for improvement once I've painted the clothes, because then I can always get back to it. And now the eyes. So for the eyes, I will be using Black Templar to begin with, or maybe Basilic and Gray, just to be on the safe side, just to make sure I don't make the area where the eye sockets are too dark. Don't want it very dark, but want it significantly darker. Yeah, that's more like it. And I'm still hesitating whether I want standard human eyes or flaming demonic eyes. If the Vix were one of the key characters featured in the story of Malifaux Burns, if they were one of those mostly affected by the Burning Man, then I would probably make their eyes glow as if they were on fire. But since they are not, I'm leaning towards a more human-like appearance. Now they look like zombies. This heavy makeup without eyes, they just look hollow. Pretty nasty. So bring up a little bit where I left too much of it. Now, well, I'll start with white and see how it goes. So maybe standard approach to eyes would be the right one here. So now the sniper work, getting the eyes right. That looks okay. That looks almost okay. Still, some improvement can be done here, just to make sure that they are even. Okay. Better, but not perfect. I will just draw a thin line beneath them with black because I lost some of the makeup here. There we go. Now it's better. Those are quite well framed. Yeah, look good. Now the other one, the pupils. So what I do when I paint fine detail, just to make sure I show it to you guys, when I put the brush, the paint on the brush, what I do is that I kind of twirl it on my palette or on the tissue, just to make sure that there is a sharp tip, which should be like 30% with paint. Because if there is paint just at the tip of it, at the very end of it, it dries immediately. So when working on fine details, there is this misconception that you should use a super small brush. Not necessarily. If you have a brush where you can form a good tip, first it doesn't dry immediately, and then it allows you to just have more control. Okay, so it looks like 3 out of 4 eyes are looking good now. And let's get a breath of fresh air and get into the 4th one. And as always, while working on such fine detail, I'm kind of moving my brush before I hit the surface, just to establish a sense of control over, just to give me a good control of the brush, so that I can smoothly move from moving the tip of the brush in the air to actually working with it on the surface of the miniature. So it looks pretty good. Maybe a slight adjustment to the left eye here, which seems too small. Really tricky to hold this miniature since it's got such a big number of detail. So many things going on here. Yeah, looks okay. So 2 sets of hollow eyes. Now maybe the eyebrows before I move on. So the eyebrows are going to be much darker than the hair, which is how it tends to look like in the real life. But actually, the quality of the miniature is so good that you can really actually see the eyebrows. You don't need to paint them. They are here. So this one and the other one now. It's like painting two miniatures, well, essentially two clones. Because one is a never-born clone of a human. I read their fluff such a long time ago, quite a few years ago actually. I don't remember it that well. But all I remember is that one of them is human and the other one is not. Now time for the pupils. So this is going to be even more tricky, so I'll grab an even smaller brush and just use black Templar. And this is the tricky part. Because it's so easy to overdo here and make their eyes look slanted, make their eyes look, well, paint them in different sizes. Just need to get a good angle to tackle the eye. Okay, that seems okay. Now the other one. Maybe I will refine it slightly. Looks good now. And now while you will find dozens of articles on how to paint eyes on miniatures, I would say that nothing beats practice. It's just a matter of painting them many times until you feel less uncomfortable doing that. Yeah, so these look fine. One advice is to try painting them actually in small size with brush on a piece of paper, just to get a good feel for the brush. But essentially, if you want to get good at painting eyes, or just get less uncomfortable doing that, all you need to do is practice. If you're feeling very uncomfortable doing that, I would say then just skip it. Just flood the eye socket with dark ink and leave it as it is. It will look fine enough. No need to force yourself to do that if you don't feel like this is something that you feel comfortable doing. Or I could actually do a bit of hobby cheating here. And I will grab a black liner, so a small pen. Let's see how this works. Maybe it will be easier. Okay, one and another. Now the one on the top looks angry. But what I wanted to have is to have this impression that she's looking down, whereas this one is looking ahead. And I got pretty much what I wanted. Now, when you look at it, it immediately looks like this comic book style of drawing, where the eyes are popping up. They are extremely white, and I want them slightly tinted. So I will get hold of soft toning and give them a glaze. And here I need to be really careful not to go over the detail so that it's not visible. So very light controlled glaze. That's too dark. I want it brighter. That's more like it. So just a quick glaze here. It will further tint the area around the eyes, and it will improve the overall appearance. Yeah. Now, time to get back to painting the fur. And I will be using Black Templar in a second, plus some other shades of brown. But I'm now trying to make sure I keep the brushes in order. And just to give you an overview, this is the setup of paints that I have. So this is the latest addition. This whole section with Green Stuff Word and AK-47 on top. Those are 4 rows of bottles that I've added. And those are just the most frequently used colors. Now back to Vic's, back to Victoria's. And the focus is in. So we'll appreciate the help that I get from Words Kimberly, who is making sure that things run smoothly here. Because it's not something that you can take for granted that things just look good. Someone has to stay there and make sure that things continue to look good in terms of quality of video. So now I will be doing a gentle dry brush with skeleton bone, and I will be using, actually, it's not a typical dry brush, because I will be using more of the side of the brush just to pick up the individual strands of hair, make them slightly more visible. And actually, this year I got 2 games of Malifaux in, which is a good start because I haven't played the game since, I believe, September 2021. So got 2 friendly games, one with Zoraida against Mataket, and the other with Enya against Maxine. Both were the old versions in both cases. The first one I lost. The second one was around the draw when we wrapped things up because it was late in the night, but felt so good to be getting some games in after such a long break. It's definitely my commitment to get some games in on a regular basis, and this is a matter of, well, first of all, being lucky that you can afford the time and effort to travel to the gaming area, or you have people with whom you can play in your area. And the second, it's just a commitment that you consciously need to make, that you need to commit time and energy to do that. So getting a bit brighter with her. And my cat is back. He seems to be upset that he was locked out of the room. So very lightly picking the hair, and then I will give it a quick glaze just to smooth things over. And I will use the soft tone again. Just a little bit of it to go over the hair lightly. Just to make sure that it looks even. And now while I'm at it, I will also very lightly touch up the skin, just to make sure that I get one slight highlight. Maybe add a little bit of soft tone to the mix. Paint a bit of a highlight in the middle of forehead, the cheekbones, just repicking. So it's a matter of repicking the highlights once you see other elements forming around them. Now I think I will go with black contrast, so black Templar. Give it a bit of a shake. And I will paint the trousers and the areas that will be metal. So getting a slightly larger brush. And starting with their pants. Because the boots I will do in a second. Just looking at the artwork to get a sense of what I want to do here. I may use some dry pigments over that to give this dirt effect. But I will make up my mind as I go along as the process of painting continues. I don't have my mind set on one specific approach here, rather numerous adjustments on the fly based on how things develop. Now the second leg, actually this one should be brown now that I look at it, but that will be fixed in a second. Just haven't seen this miniature painted anywhere, and looking at the artwork where I see part of it on the box isn't super helpful, as it gives me only a general idea of what I want to do. So the armor, because of course the things that you want to protect the most are your elbows and shoulders. Well, shoulders in this case, because the other one has some longer gloves, longer leather gloves that reach her elbows. And this is a bit of a time-consuming process where the fact that I've assembled the miniatures isn't extremely helpful, but I can work around that. Just need to be creative with how I hold the miniature. There's one shoulder pad. It's already becoming more three-dimensional, as I like to say. And now this looks like it's made out of metal. This is clearly the type of combat armor that allows mobility rather than ensures protection. How to kill your enemies and look fine doing so. Leaving it very dark on purpose because then it will be easier to pick up the highlights again. Now the other one. And again, the trousers will be dark and the boots will be dark brown, which is just fine. So now what I will be doing is I will be blocking the areas, different sections of the clothes, armor, and hopefully by the end of the stream I will get some highlights on most of that. Maybe even tackle this magical effect going on here, which I want to look as if it was fire. So blocking the area where the trousers meet the material of the loincloth or whatever that is. Just taking a peek every now and then at the artwork to make sure I get every dark element locked in. This is another metal element, so it will be base coated black. And another one here. And another piece of armor here. Now, in order to get it, I will need to take it upside down. And this will be dull metal. That's how I envision it. So I will be, I used to, typically I would paint metallics from dark metallics to bright metallics, but recently I've been using very bright metallics, and what I do, my approach now is that I tint them with different glazes of inks. So that's the approach that I intend to have here as well. And now I will repick one area here, which shouldn't be black. And I'm not happy about it being black, because this will need to be her leather shoe. So just getting it back to base coat color. And as we're approaching the midpoint of the stream, I'm feeling pretty good about the progress made here so far. And I will pick up some elements that were tinted with this glaze that I used on the skin, because they will be painted with brown separately in a moment. Same goes here and here. So like I said, when I was working on the skin, I'm not worried if the contrast color drips over other elements. I can go back with brush and repick it, bring it back to the base color, and then use different contrast to change the color to what I want to have versus what I accidentally landed doing. Now the shoes, I will also pick them up a little bit, since they got affected with the gray wash I used on the base. This is going to look pretty awesome when it's finished. Because for now, those are just few elements that are becoming more pronounced, lost in this big, spacious, undefined element, which is here again. Just repick it with bright color, because this will be on fire. Now time to start working on the ropes, I think. So what I will start with is I will go to snakebite leather, and I will work with bright browns before I move to dark browns. Because looking at the artwork, it looks as if the gloves and the chest piece and the boots are made of the same material. So that's how I want to tackle them. Well, luckily the cat decided to leave the room, which means that because he was about to jump on my desk, and that's not where I want him to be. So now the loincloths. I will start with snakebite leather, because it's a nice leathery color, which is light and will work well with this darker brown that I will have on the gloves and some other areas. I will need to switch to a smaller brush. So just working around the belt. So while applying contrast surfaces, I'm finding it with larger brush, but just for having better control when I paint thinner stripes, I just switch to smaller brush, smaller size brush. That's a bit more helpful then. So there is some definition already. And now I can switch back to larger brush, give it a bit of shake. And I did it on purpose, so I applied too much of the contrast on the surface, because then it's easier for me to just spread it around more evenly rather than going back and forth between the miniature and the pot with paint. And as always, when I applied the first color of contrast paint, I just turn the miniature upside down, check it from a few angles to make sure I cover the whole surface. It seems like I did that here, which is fine. And now the second one. And again, I will apply too much of it just to make sure it flows nicely into all the recesses. And I can spread it around just like that. And I will reinforce it with another layer shortly from the bottom, just to make sure it stays darker at the bottom. do this rope here. And I will switch to a smaller brush now that I have the bulk of the surface covered. Snakebite leather is a nice color. It's slightly yellowish, so it's not that intense brown. There are still some belts here that will be darker, so that will contrast with it. Hey there, Mike Bluff. How has 2022 started for you? Hope things are good. Feels like the year has barely started and it's already the, what, 11th? 11 days just flew by and I don't really know how it happened so fast. Just time goes by too fast. The good thing about contrast is that also they have this matte finish when they dry. I'm doing pretty good, thanks. It's been a pretty good start to the year, I would say. Not too hectic. Been able to paint a few things. Get 2 games of Malifaux in, which is good because I, in the last quarter of 2012, 2021, I played only, I think, 1 or 2 games. So hoping to get more games in on regular basis this year. Feels like there is a new game with the titled masters, although I haven't played using a titled master or haven't played against a titled master yet. There is some excitement. The local meta in the Warsaw area has become a bit more alive. So last Thursday when I went to the club where we play regularly, there were at one moment 10 people playing friendly games of Malifaux, which is huge compared to what we would get in previous 2 years. So that's a good sign. And I hope the trend continues and more people get to join because it feels like a good moment to join where even for people who have been playing the game for a while, lots of things are new. So everyone now can have their gotcha moments, I guess. Now moving to darker browns. People might be just less inhibited to join when it seems like everyone can be surprised with something. So now the darker browns. Now I'm switching to Gore Granta 4, which is a stronger, more, I would say more reddish brown. It's less yellowish compared to Snakebite Leather, which I've just applied. So I'm letting it flow into the recesses, but removing the excess. I want recesses to be darker, but I don't want them to be flooded with color. So now the one that is sleeping at the top. one and on the next. That's what happens next. This one. That's why I made their skin look slightly pale, so that the warm browns will play nicely with the pale skin tone I've chosen. And now the other one. It's funny now, it feels like I'm painting the same miniature but in two versions simultaneously. I was initially thinking of using slightly different skin tone for one of those to indicate that one of them is a doppelganger, but now the more I'm into painting them, the more I'm leaning towards just keeping it similar. And the belts here will be slightly different. The same saturated deep shade of brown. And I'm sorry for keeping the angle terrible, but I just need to get paint into deep recesses. But it's already becoming to look more vibrant when all the white surfaces are getting covered with deep brown and light brown. Then I will do an overbrush and see where it takes me, because then I can fine tune with glazes or a few selective highlights. Don't have the specific plan yet. It will come into fruition as I just go along. Okay, now the gloves, I reckon, because those are also, when I look at the artwork, it seems like the gloves and the boots have the same shade. I can then pick them up slightly and fine tune with glazes. But that will happen after I've given them a base coat of Gore Gruntifer, which is what I'm using, which is this nice saturated shade of brown. So that's where I am at this point. Now the second glove of the one at the top. Those are the Mercenary Colors, right? The symbol is a yellow rose, and I think that when they are represented in the artwork in the books, that browns and different shades of brown are the dominant colors. That's why I'm not using any red on purpose, because this spell effect is going to be like flame. So I'm reserving red for the final stage here, for the final touch. So next week, because I intend to push as far as I can with these today or tonight, regardless of whether, well, it depends on where you're joining from. It's either today or tonight. For me, it's tonight. It's almost 11 p.m. here. So my intention is to go as far as I can and maybe finish it offline if I don't manage to do the whole thing. And next week, I think I will be doing the Gurions, so the big, nasty, mutated giants from the Euripides keywords, from Savage keyword. Just want to paint something slightly different. And just show how I work on those larger models, because that's a different type of fun. So now I need to just make sure I get base coat of brown across the whole surface, which will be tricky. But doable. Okay, so now onto the boots. And I can just paint them brown, because then it's just easier. Or maybe I can actually go ahead and start with the areas that are black. That will be painted with metallics at a later stage. So starting with those. Not sure how much of protection they actually provide, but at least they look fancy. So just making sure I base coat the whole part in black. There are also those belts that connect the shoulder pads, so I will go over them with deep brown, with even darker brown. I may do the same on the boots, so I may just end up using Gore Grunta for them all. Just let me adjust the camera slightly. So it's becoming to look like a 3D miniature rather than a collection of random elements at this point. And I'm feeling good about it. So that's one boot, now the other one. And after that, I will have most of the colors locked in. And I can start an overbrushing to get a sense of how I want to proceed with the highlights, because the idea is to repeat the details, fine-tune them with glazes. So it's a kind of speed painting I'm actually doing. Let's say quality speed painting. And just going through different stages. And now this is the stage where I block all the main areas once I've painted the skin and the faces, which was the most time consuming element because that alone took me the first hour of the stream. And the rest is a bit more straightforward. And the nice thing about painting Mali for miniatures is that the more colors you lock in, the more you appreciate the quality of the miniature that you're working on. I missed one black element. So going back to it now. And back to Gore Grunta for and back to blocking the remaining boots with brown. What I like doing when I want this deep saturated look for leather and using Gore Grunta fur as a base coat, once I've done an overbrush with off-white, I use red or orange glazes just to reinforce this saturated brown look, which is one way of keeping different brown shades of brown on the same model. So one more boot. And then all the main colors will be locked in. Apart from swords, and while these are not the magical swords that they would used in the past. I still want them to look extra shiny. So I will work on them probably in the final stage, just to make sure that the metallics are somewhat aligned with the overall composition. So maybe I will use some color shift on them, make them look something between green and red metallics. Well, I still have time to make that decision. See, there is a lot I don't know at this stage, because I have this general plan for what I want to do. But nothing is, so to say, set in stone. So let's just pause for a second and have a look at what's been done here. I still need to paint those leather belts below the metal elements. But there is already a lot going here. So now moving to slightly darker brown, which will be Psycho Brown contrast paint. And I will just pick up the leather straps joining these two here, and on the right arm here I missed a spot, so I'll need to repick it. That's good now. And maybe also here is where I need to place some more shade. And those two elements here as well. And I know that many people come into New Year with hobby resolutions, how many miniatures, how many crews. I don't have any hobby resolutions. I committed to the Painters Challenge for 2022, which is something that I recommend you all do, all of you who paint. This is on the Word forums where you can declare a certain number of stones that you intend to paint every month. And it keeps you motivated to paint on a regular basis, consistently. I've been doing that for 3 years now, I believe. Now I will, before I do the overbrush, I will also use different colors to tint the base slightly. So I will use these three. So green, yellow, and brown, just to make some variety on the stone. Just introduce some variety. Because when you think of stone formations, they aren't just gray and black and white. There are all types of shades and colors going on. So starting with green, then just tinting it, placing random spots of green, now a few seemingly random spots of yellow. Maybe actually this will look as if it's some kind of sand. So slightly tinting it close to the yellow, close to the green with yellow as well. And some brown. This is much darker, so I will use it more selectively, I think. Okie dokie. So now I'm getting somewhere. It's a good feeling to know that some considerable progress has been made. Maybe I will, while I'm waiting for the trusts to dry completely, I'll just repick those tiny areas where I will be painting metallics later on. Do you know what? Actually, I can do the blades now. Just maybe mark them out in black. Okay. It's not. I was worried that it might be partly broken, but it's fine. Not broken. Just this is how she holds it. So I will use the medium-sized brush just to paint the handles and the blades before I introduce some highlights. And I think I will paint the blades as the last element here because I want to get this special effect going on. I won't be using any dry pigments this time like I did on new version of Yanlo. Just don't think it's that relevant here. I want colors to be more realistic here. And Yanlo was just a good excuse to use, well, just to go a bit crazy with colors. And that's another thing I like about Malifaux, that there are just so many hobby opportunities to use different types of crazy color schemes. Now this is really tricky to get to, but yeah, made it work. Good. Yeah. And the other blade, just working along the line of the edge of the blade while I'm working on this sword. Not perfect, but that is fine because I will get to fix it when I'm working on this special effect. I can try to kind of spread it around a little bit, which is just fine. I didn't really expect the miniatures to have this effect. I thought it would be just two Vicks jumping with blades, but then when I saw the render for the first time, or maybe it was when I actually opened the box, or when I saw the back of the box, the back side of the box with those 3D renders, was somewhat puzzled. I didn't really know how to approach painting these elements. But now I have a pretty good idea where I'm going with that, which will be the final hour of the stream tonight. And when you move the miniature and look at it from different angles, you always can redo some elements. So a good opportunity to just reevaluate what you've done so far. Okie dokie, seems like we're going somewhere. Now maybe I will do one more thing with Skeleton Horde, which is this light brown, yellowish brown. I noticed that I missed a spot here and here, so I'll just fill it in. So that's where I am with the progress at this point. Feeling pretty good about progress made so far. Let's get the focus back. Right, maybe no. There's the focus, perfect. I think those light browns will nicely contrast with metallics and the flames here. So now I will grab a larger brush, which I use for dry brushing. Get one of my favorites, so the Skeleton Bone from Warpaints, from Army Painter Warpaints, which is almost completely dry. I need to buy a new one because I use this color so often. Okay, there we go. So now going with an overbrush of everything. So making sure that the brush is almost completely dry. And just picking up the details, because then I can tweak them with glazes. But I want to get the details out first. It's such a dynamic miniature that it can feel a bit intimidating because you don't really know where to start with it. There's just so much going on here. So my suggestion is that if it takes you a lot of time to just get started, well, just get started and well, commit to painting one section. For example, look at the artwork, look at the color that you feel comfortable with, and start working with that color. Then move gradually onto another one. And just go color by color, segment by segment. And the thing is that the brain works in that way that when you see the effects of your work, especially if you've put some considerable effort into that, the endorphins get released. So the hormones, the happy hormones. And this is what keeps you going, really. I'm not speaking only about painting, generally in life, when you see the effects of your work, be it physical work or intellectual work or whatever you do, when you see the effects, when they become tangible, you get this energy boost, which is called endorphin rush. And I think this applies to painting as well, because once you see some tangible effects, then you start getting more pleasure out of it. And I fully recognize that some people just hate painting, and that's fine. Not everyone has to do it. I would say different strokes for different folks, right? Not everyone will enjoy the same activity. Some people will get the kick out of playing the game more than painting, which is perfectly fine too. But when you think consciously about just doing some progress, so when you are overwhelmed with your backlog of unpainted miniature, your pile of possibilities, as some call it, just be systematic about it. Celebrate small things like painting 1 out of 200 miniatures that you have lying in your closet of unpainted miniatures. If you happen to be Doug from Texas, who has a closet of unpainted miniatures with hordes of them. So just make sure that you feel good about yourself once you've painted a couple from that huge backlog. And don't get too depressed don't get too unhappy. don't be overwhelmed with the backlog. Thank you, Macbeth. That's really nice of you. Glad you like it. So that's the progress again here. Quite nice progress for 2 hours of painting, I would say. Feeling pretty good. So now the rock formations. As you can see now, the different colors that I applied are starting to show through. And I will slightly push the highlights on the leather elements, very slightly. And we'll be working with glazes again in a second. And then this whole special thing. That's a tasty brush. Tastes like rainbow. That's a habit that is difficult to get out of. Because once you start licking your brush, you just do it without thinking about it. And I recognize that I do it. Maybe not the most healthy thing to do, but it's just a habit that you develop. So what I'm doing now is, since I've decided to paint this with flame-like effect, I'm going to start by making it super bright to the point where it's essentially white. So now I'm using off-white rather than applying white directly. Just, I know that I will need a few layers here, so why not starting with something that is close to white so that I can keep on gradually bringing it to white rather than forcing the white directly onto surface which is tinted with all kinds of different colors now. And you see, I'm using this time now to start bringing back the white, and in a second I will switch to inks and add some depths to the colors that I have locked in and highlighted with generous dry brush. So I'm thinking about a few different processes and different end goals that I want to achieve within the next hour of the stream. Drink the paint water. I've done it. I've tried it. That's not something I haven't done. You know, so the trick of not drinking painting water is to make sure that the caps look completely different. So this is drinking water, paint water, drinking water, paint water. If I had them both in yellow cap, I would be drinking paint water constantly. That's pretty disgusting because I've been there, I've tried it, not voluntarily, just, not thinking about what I'm doing, and can't recommend it really. Not a fun experience, but I survived all kind of different nasty stuff you can get. So the special effect, I've used this comparison before. So this is the kind of look that I will be going for. This kind of vivid flame. And as you can see, if I bring it to the camera, the sections, the deeper sections here are white. Then it becomes yellow, then it becomes slightly more orangish, and then it becomes red, dark red, and fully black on the edges. So this is the kind of look that I will put here, because I believe this will be a kind of nice frame, because I have some warm colors here, and this red flames would be accentuating the browns nicely. But before I do that, I will start with the glazes. So I will start with soft tone, thin it down slightly with water, because with glazes I can break the consistency, I can break the coverage, that's fine, and work on those bright parts just to smooth over the dry brush I've done. I wonder if there is anyone here watching who plays Vix, and what is the perception of the new Vix versus the old Vix. Because I've just read some comments and seems like there is no immediate conclusion that this version is better than that version. I think that what speaks in favor of the old Vix was the versatility, that you could essentially run two masters and have double the efficiency, double the damage output, double the glass cannon, and here you have one maybe more powerful glass cannon, but still it's a one cannon. So if you have ways of debuffing a master but by putting, for example, stand condition or other types of condition, or somehow targeting the master, then countering the fix could be more effective in this version rather than two masters where you would need to commit more resources to controlling them somehow. At least this is just a gist of what I read or heard, because there has been so much in terms of podcasts going on that hard to really remember now exactly where I heard it or read it. Now I will be using different brush for different shades of brown and further pushing the color on those leather elements. So the goal here is to just work on the area as the paint dries on the other. I'm switching to another section. Just working from one section to another, moving back and forth. This is the stage where I'm introducing more depth to the highlights, because I've done this generous dry brush, and such approach allows me now to tone it down. And I like the fact that while those are essentially copies, like the doppelganger of the Victoria Chambers, there are still some differences. So their armors are slightly different, the gloves are slightly different, which is kind of cool. It's better than having two completely identical versions on the same base. Makes it more interesting. And while it continues to dry, I may actually start. No, I will push the white first a little bit more. That's what I want to do. And then the metallics will be the final stage. So now for my next streak, I will make the white whiter. meaning that I will use pure white. And for pure white, the best color I can recommend is Dead White from Vallejo Game Color, which is just as it says, Dead White, perfect, spotless white. So I will, now when I apply it, I don't worry about covering the whole surface, rather I'm more focusing on pushing it into the recesses, making sure it stays locked in there. It's funny when you look at the chat window and when you join the stream, just pop in and see random things without context. It can be a bit strange experience. Like imagine someone enters the stream now and just sees drink the paint water. It can be quite confusing if you don't know what kind of discussion preceded that. So again, here I'm just making sure I push the white into the recesses because those are the brightest spots. The recesses, when you paint fire, you just go from brightest to darkest. And that's why I'm using pure white after applying off-white, just to make sure that it's firmly locked into the recesses. And then I will start working with very bright shade of yellow, and then with slightly darker yellow, then with orange, then orange mixed with red, then pure red, then dark red, then red mixed with black, and then light touch of black on the tips, on the very edges of this flaming arc. That way it will look scorching hot. At least that's the intention. And the glaze that I applied on those darker browns is kind of shiny, so I will take the shine off with a different glaze, which I know has less of a shine, which is red. But I won't be using it on the whole surface. I will just apply it a bit more selectively towards the recesses. And we're pretty good on time. Enough time to make some more significant progress here. I would say that I would be 80 to 90% finished with this double master model at the end of the stream. And red kind of brings it all together. Again, it tints the brown and it further filters it towards what I want to have, because I want it to be somewhat reddish in appearance, as if it was maybe reflecting some of the light of coming up out from this flaming effect. just about different level of saturation going on here. And while I'm saturating, I will also use a little bit of Nuln oil, so black wash over the trousers or pants. I guess if you're in the US, you will say pants. In UK, you say trousers. I believe those would be the differences between British American English, although I may be wrong. So now filtering black with black, because it looks a bit kind of grayish. I want it to be pure black. Alrighty. Brush is like a breadstick. Yeah, I mean, you just don't notice the flavor or anything after a while. You just get used to. But it's all about maintaining the tip of the brush, and while you can do it by twirling the brush on the tissue or somewhere else, just won't be the same. Looks like white is completely dry, so I can start with the flaming effect. So I'll make noise because that's another thing that is part of kind of my, maybe not a commitment, but not a resolution, but more of a reflection, that when I paint, I tend to leave all the paints around the area. Now I try to keep them, put them back in the proper place as I paint, just to create less of a mess on my workspace. Just being systematic about it. Fine, just it helps with organization. I feel I work better when there is clear working surface. So for the flame part, I will start with candy ink. It's called Citrine Yellow. So it's super bright, vivid shade of yellow. And that's what I'm starting with. It will already give a nice kick to the white. And I choose this brush. So a thick brush that I would be using for dry brushing. And I paint using the kind of the side of the brush so as to avoid going very deep into the recesses here, just leaving some of the white showing through. I can always push the white back with a brush, but it will be a bit easier. Just don't apply too much of it at this point. Don't go over the board. It's from the Candy Ink range from Green Stuff World. I really like those products. They allow for some nice special effects, and I think those are quite suitable here. And I feel fine if I tint some of the areas around this with yellow and later on with orange, because it looks like it will make it look as if it was kind of absorbing the glow or reflecting it somehow. And it takes some patience to do that, because it requires a few layers of paint to get a solid look. It's basically, at this point, it's white tinted with yellow. But over the course of next, well, 5 to 7 highlights, it will become a flame. But it's also important to let the paint dry completely before applying more highlights. See, so already there is something going on here. So let's give it some time to dry. I could use the hairdryer to speed it up a little bit, which I might do. But I can also use this to work on some other areas. So I will apply, while I wait for it to dry, I will apply a little bit of mithril silver. Hey, Futuromaniac. Cool, how did it go? How did your characters fare against Victorias, and which Victorias did you face? Now you got me interested. Since you say that you're speaking of the devil, I assume it didn't go too well? Was it the case? Now I'm applying pure mithril silver, which is like the brightest shade of silver that I have at my disposal. And I will explain why in a second. I'm thinking, have I faced the Victorias in M2E? Maybe once? In M3E? No, not once in M3. In the second edition, I faced them and got swept by them. In the third, I haven't. I think with masters like Victorious or with just for comparable scale Nekima, you just need to brace for impact, be ready to take them on, use some kind of tank model that can survive or that can die without allowing Victorious to kill other models, and then hopefully get back at them. The yellow is still not fully dry, so I will continue working on metallics. Both of them played some through the breach. Alright, the characters have stakes in Titania versus Lilith conflict, and they came after the crown that was in the holding of Victorious. They actually came really close to killing Vanessa, but eventually decided to let her go. Now that would make some impact. Interesting. Don't know much about Through the Breach. Haven't played it once. Heard good things about it. And I heard that it's, if you face a master there, then it's treated as if the master was always flipping a 13. Is it something like that? So that it's extremely hard to actually fare well against masters. If you face them, you need to work your way around them. That's what I heard. Killing Vanessa, it's also, if you were close to killing a firmly established character in the world of the Malifaux, then you were quite far, and you must have been quite advanced with those characters that you had. Or lucky. or both? Like 14, only tyrants are stronger. Okay, so not a good chance to get rid of them. I'm just glad that in the game of Malifaux there is no character that automatically flips 13s. I mean the EVS keyword, they have this ability that they automatically flip 9s, which is already quite impactful. Because you can guarantee a solid moderate flip if you have the right suit. So can't imagine having a character in the game that automatically flips 13. Maybe for a scenario, like a special scenario, maybe some kind of collaborative gaming where you need to remove the same character. The climax was a motorboat chase through the ruins of Sancor, and one of the victorious jumped to their boat and almost cut four of them in half. Wow, that sounds like fun. Sounds like just the kind of thing that can happen in Malifaux, where you're just trying to go on an adventure and all of a sudden there is this powerful soulstone user who can essentially annihilate you in a second. Yeah, it must be quite an immersive experience if you like the lore of the game, the fluff of the game, then I can clearly see the incentive for playing through the breach. Although I have never played it, I've never been much of an RPG guy. I think I played some Warhammer back in the day, like 20 years ago, but never really got into it. Not because I didn't like it, but just was doing lots of different things. As long as you have good people being running the game, then I guess it can be great experience. Oh yeah, you should be proud. High octane action. Yeah, well, if you're in the Central European time, then it's probably a good, reasonable time to go to sleep. It's almost midnight here, 11:30. But I rarely go to sleep before midnight. I'm a night owl type of person, so typically this is my most productive time of day, where I'm not working, where I'm not doing my regular work. The kids are asleep, and I can just paint. So those are the productive hours for me. But I guess that role-playing games have the COVID situation didn't impact the community so much because it's the virtual environment can be quite good for conducting the game. Goblin down, following a massive peak, and then even shot down the hat of Summer. Wow, that's something to be proud of. Shooting the head of Summer, I can really appreciate it. That's cool. That's like the epitome of cool. Shooting things off gremlins and just making an impact on the master. That's cool. Summer was actually a master that I considered buying when I started with Malifaux back in the first edition. But then I decided to go with Lady Justice because I just loved the miniatures of Death Marshals so much. Played maybe a few games, and then on the spur of the moment, I just bought Metal Box with Dreamer, and I just fell in love with Neverborn since then. It's been Neverborn only. So I sold my guild, bought into Neverborn, never looked back. Big Apple's Chicken Cavalry. That's a good retaliation. Peekaboo, that must be a scary thing to face. Peekaboo used to be so gross in the second edition. You just couldn't hide from it. And it had armor, or it was just... And it was something that you would keep way at the back at a safe spot and just launch missiles. So don't have fond memories of facing that Peekaboo in the second edition, although I never saw it on the table in the third edition, so I don't know what happened to it, whether it lost some of its power or impact. Although I remember a game at a tournament, which I actually won. It was Dreamer versus Ulix, I believe. There was this Peekaboo, and I had Tuka, who can drop from the shadows. He could still do that. He could do that as well in the second edition. So I deployed him next to the Peekaboo. And then in the second edition, Neverborn had this amazing, probably the best upgrade in the game, or definitely the best upgrade for Neverborn, which basically was an upgrade that you could swap for another upgrade. So depending on the circumstances, you could choose from a number of upgrades. And what I did, I switched it to the upgrade that allows to ignore armor, and then killed the Peekaboo in the first activation of the game. And then there was this scheme, the equivalent of Hidden Martyrs, which I had on Tuka. So obviously my opponent retaliated by killing Tuka and granting me more points. It was called Frame for Murder, I believe. That was the name of the scheme. But then in the second edition you scored differently. You scored 2 points, I think, if the model was killed by a henchman or master. So that was a different approach. That felt good, because then from the first turn I knew that I have a huge advantage. Although my opponent did manage to score some points in that game anyway, with some scheme marker placing. Don't remember the schemes that well, but that's another good thing about Malifaux, that you can lose your master, lose your key model, and still get some points in. Okay, so the metallics are base coated. They will be given some treatment with glazes, but before I do that, I will work a bit more on the special effect. So now I'm switching to a slightly darker shade of green, of yellow, I mean. So not the Citrine Yellow, but Hydromel Yellow. And this is not a candy ink, this is intensity ink. So intensity ink is like a vivid color that works similarly to contrast paints. So it makes an immediate impact, which you will see shortly. Okay, so if you look even at the piece of paper, this one is significantly darker than the one I used for the start. So I'm working from the edges towards the white area, or just kind of pushing it out, making sure that the bright shade stays locked in the middle. And it's already getting a bit more colorful. That's why I can already go ahead and mark the blade with yellow. Just so long as I ensure that there is some white showing through, it's fine. But even if I go over the white, it's also not a problem because I can push the back in later on. Just bring it back if needed. So now being careful with the yellow, using it somewhat in a somewhat controlled manner, not to get it on everything. Although it's fine if they tint some elements around it, because they will be tinted with orange in a second, which will be a bit more impactful. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for dropping by, Future Maniac, and thanks for sharing your Through the Breach adventure. That was a good read for sure. Hope the story continues, and we see you on one of the streams again. Now you will dream of pigs and murderous twins, which is not a bad thing. Because there are worse nightmares in Malifaux than pigs. So it's becoming more yellowish now, and it plays nicely with the browns. I will need to let it dry completely. But as it dries, I can just reinforce the yellow a bit more, especially towards the edges, because I want it to get darker and darker closer to the edge. Yeah, always, for sure. So while the second highlight of the flame is drying, I will go ahead and start to work on metallics. So I'll grab the soft stone, and without diluting it, we'll just apply it directly onto the metal areas. You will see immediately how it impacts, because it will flow nicely into the recesses, make it look like old beaten metal. And then I can push the shades a bit further with contrast paint if needed, and reapply the silver on the edges. So that's how I like to work with metallics, especially when I have a lot of brown around, because then it fits into the overall composition. And the good thing about inks is that it tints the area, but the edges remain silver like you see on the shoulder blades. So it gives this nice, deep, saturated look. Pretty happy with where I ended up here. She looks like she means business for sure. I think that the area below her right arm, here I will make some kind of glow effect as if it was coming off this flame. I may need to do it offline because I may be unable to do all of it during the stream tonight. So this is the moment where things will start getting heated up because I will be adding orange and again candy ink. So not that impactful, more of tinting rather than dramatically changing the look. Wow, if only I had 30 more minutes. But now it's enough. 3 hours. It's a lot to make significant progress on a model. So again, starting from the edges, just test the color. As you can see, it nicely blends into what I already have. Just moving a bit closer towards the middle. Maybe I will use the side of the brush here a little bit more. No problem if I tint too much because I can always bring back some yellow or white to the midsection. The idea is just to have some of the white showing through for this flame-like effect. And now this is the color that really tints other elements. So I'm feeling comfortable just leaving some of it showing on the blade or on the gloves, just to go start building this glow effect. So a little bit on the cloak. Now we apply it to the palette. The pink is just to take it slow, don't rush it. Because when you build up highlights gradually, it's just too easy to mess it up and ruin lots of hard work. And again, if you look at this flame effect, it can be intimidating. There's a lot of it. So just focus on one area. So focus on the upper section. Don't go to the bottom one until you feel happy with what you have up here. It always puts another layer of challenge for me to paint on the stream because I'm not holding the miniature in the most comfortable way for me because I want to share everything with you guys, all the stages, all the brush strokes. So trying to keep it in the middle of the camera screen. And as always, feel free to shout at me in the chat if I stop doing that for a moment. Then I will readjust the angle. Then the red will be even more impactful. So just a few guided, gentle brush strokes to just mark the area that will be further accentuated with orange. I think flames are a good choice, although blue magic effect might work well here as well. So just a few more highlights. So tinting the base with orange now, just to make sure that the area around the feet and around this flame is affected. And also pushing some of the flame. Yeah, thanks. Thanks. I think it's, the main idea was that, well, Malifaux burns, so that's the easy choice. Plus I have a number of new lovely paints that I've been using recently. So I thought I've had some practice with painting flames on recent models. So why not go further with it? Can't go wrong with flames in Malifaux, especially now that it burns. Yeah, we are wrapping up in shortly, very shortly, just a few minutes left. So I will just make a few more spots here and there. I think I will also keep this blade as if it was affected by fire. So this will be orangish, reddish over the next couple of layers. Another idea here would be to use blood effect, because those are, well, essentially butchers. They just go in and kill people. So blood could be also quite good, and red, so intense red would also work well. But then black seems to be like an easy, like a choice that it's too easy. So let me just do a few more touches of orange, and I won't be going with red because for the next stage I will just push the flames further with red, again working from the edge towards the middle. Once the orange is firmly established, I will just push a bit more with red, then red mixed with black, and then pure black just at the very tips of the flames. And once that's done, along the way I will also make sure that there is some impact on the miniatures, although not too much, because I like the way that warm browns are clearly marked out and they are firmly silhouetted against this flaming effect. So don't want to push the OSL too much. It's like magical flame. It's not like they are burning. So here is a spot I missed. And again, making sure that I look at it from different angles. So let's do a bit of a wrap up, since we have just a few minutes left and I will be off in a second. So what I've done today was to follow pretty much the artwork, the box art. So using different shades of brown and pale skin tone. So the first hour was spent mainly on painting the skin and with the main focus on faces, eyes, lips, and gradual smooth highlights there. See, back to the focus, back to the focus line. And then I worked on the clothes and the metallics, which will be pushed a bit further in the recesses. Maybe a very